Thanks, Olga, and good evening to everybody from Hong Kong. Actually, it's from Singapore. I'm in Singapore right now, but yeah, good afternoon or good evening from East Asia. I'm going to give you a bit of a regional update on what's happening, as my most of my remit is actually across the whole of the East Asia and APAC region. Looking at the situation in Hong Kong, which I'm sorry, it's a brief introduction. My name is Jeff Moore. I work for an organization called ARUP, and we're a multinational engineering consultancy, and we're involved in a lot of big, major infrastructure projects all over the world. And in the last few years, we've been asked more and more by many of our clients to look at how we can integrate the urban air mobility and advanced air mobility technologies into the urban landscape, and particularly in how we can bring these technologies into the conventional aviation space and marry them up with technologies. And I work very extensively across the whole of APAC in our projects in this space. Looking at Hong Kong is an interesting space because in many ways it's places in which you could place new electric aviation services in that it's very small. It has a lot of coastline. There's a lot of waterways and coastline in the area. Anybody that's ever visited Hong Kong, I'm sure you realize that the place is a very, very dense city. There's a lot of high-rise buildings and a lot of people, very high population for the size of the city. But the ratio of the coastline to the land area is quite favorable in that we have a lot of places that we can fly aircraft over the water without flying them over the city. And we already have an established helicopter infrastructure that connects many of the locations. But it's kind of important to sort of view this in context of where we really are. So Hong Kong and Macau are part of the Greater Bay Area within Greater China. And together we sit in this very tiny little space down in the bottom right-hand corner of China as a whole. And obviously China is this great big behemoth of a country that sits over on the right-hand side of the map. As was mentioned earlier in the section on the Chinese AAM sector, we now have this initiative that's been launched by the Chinese government for the past couple of years called the Low Altitude Economy Initiative. And it's a slightly difficult to define thing, but the Chinese government have actually taken a very strategic view of this. And it's not really, the low altitude economy is not just about the business of flying vehicles and the business of the application of unmanned aircraft. It's looking at the entire contribution to the Chinese economy that all of those technologies and their ancillary adjacent services will make. So everything from manufacturing parts through to development of battery technologies, through to the software development and the development of new services and technologies around the building out of new systems and services, and as well as that part of the contribution that comes from operating services in themselves. And nearly all of that work, nearly all of that business is concentrated in this tiny little space in the Greater Bay Area that surrounds Hong Kong and Macau. Although there is elements of the low altitude economy investments happening in many of the other provinces, it's really very clear that it's Shenzhen, which is China's Silicon Valley. It's the Shenzhen region, along with the other surrounding provinces that make up the Greater Bay Area, and then the two sort of side by side sister nations of Hong Kong and Macau make up the total. So, looking at what the low altitude economy means to the Chinese government, it's really, there's a major part of the legislation and the initiative that talks about what it can do in relation to economic development for specific areas. But it's also very focused on technology and innovation as well, particularly this removal of some of these stuck technologies, which have always been the problem of the industry as a whole. And we're looking at scale. How do we make higher energy density batteries? How do we look at new energy technologies as a whole? How do we develop new software systems to work on our increasing ability to be autonomous with these vehicles. And all of these industries are focused very heavily inside the Greater Bay Area, with the household names DJI and EHang headquartered in that area, along with many other organizations that are also building aircraft and AAM related technologies. And one of the things that really lit the fire under the low altitude economy throughout the region is that the Chinese government actually placed a price tag on it and said, look, this is what we believe this is going to be worth over the next couple of years. And that's really what's got everybody excited. And it's what started to bring Hong Kong into the mix as well. And we had the announcement in last year's policy address from the Hong Kong chief executive, which really introduced the start of an initiative that's going to move Hong Kong firmly into the LAE, into the LAE world. And having Shenzhen, having the Greater Bay Area right next door, gives us this amazing access to supply chain. It's generated many of the organizations now that are building real operational services that are happening in the Shenzhen and the Greater Bay Area on the other side of the border, and that's making it very attractive for Hong Kong to try to get involved in that. And we're not only seeing innovators and manufacturers that are just manufacturing equipment. As I say, we're actually seeing real services in place now. Organizations like Meitan, who are doing food delivery all over Shenzhen, SF Express, who have a wide range of services, last mile delivery services on Shenzhen, medical delivery services, and a lot more. And these guys are trying to bring those services now into Hong Kong. We're also seeing widespread use of drones by the police force in China, and now beginning to see trials of that within Hong Kong as well. And also a major piece of the low altitude economy initiative from the Chinese government was to try to bring many of the smaller airports in the Greater Bay Area that are not particularly heavily used, the small regional airports, try to encourage them to start looking at the use of autonomous cargo vehicles in order to concentrate logistics operations and bring those logistics operations to the big connectors, the big hub airports where they've got the connectivity elsewhere. So for Hong Kong, really, one of the great things about Hong Kong is the fact that we're part of the Greater Bay Area. So we've got the Greater Bay just over the border, just across the water. It's very, very close. But Hong Kong is not Shenzhen. We have a different government. We have different regulations. We have a different regulatory and legislative environment. The physical environment makes it very difficult as well for us to be able to actively work in some of the heavier industries like development of new battery technologies, for instance, or the assembly of aircraft, because we simply don't have the space. It's not the kind of business that Hong Kong is set up to do. As an environment is very, very complex. And certainly over the last few years, we've started to see the climate change issues beginning to affect Hong Kong even more. The number of heavy typhoons that we're experiencing every year is getting worse and worse, and that makes it a difficult flying environment for everybody, not just for small aircraft, but for big aircraft as well. But we do have good access to the open water, and we're very many respects to the Greater Bay Area if you take into account routes across the water. And the double-edged sword with Hong Kong, it's very, very small, but it does have an extremely efficient public transportation system. And we're actually very well connected with high-speed rail. So now with transport times between Hong Kong and Shenzhen are down to as low as 14 minutes. Some of the use cases for intercity transportation are a little bit tenuous. But still, we have a lot of other space. And the international airport, Hong Kong International Airport, is a major transportation hub for passengers and freight with better connectivity than pretty much anywhere in the region. And as a result, it's very attractive for people to start shipping freight from the Greater Bay Area down into Hong Kong Airport and then using that connector to be able to go all over the world. And we're seeing that with surface transportation right now, with a lot of barges that are bringing freight down to the airport for immediate transfer to aircraft to move on. But we're also seeing a lot of interest in bringing that traffic by air as well. Regulation is a massive issue. As you can see, almost the entire city is a no-fly zone because we've got an enormous airport sitting in the middle of it. So it's very, very difficult for people to set up small operations working in that environment. But we are beginning to see a change, and this year we've really accelerated. So we've got now the government has started to get involved with the launch of the regulatory sandbox and also the LE working group, which are actively beginning to work on developing new regulations. We've seen some relaxation in weight limits for drones, now gone up to 150 kilograms. At least we've got some regulation for that end of the market now, where we didn't have anything before. And we have got, there's a framework now in place that allows us to be able to undertake trials as long as they're under very, very closely controlled situations. The Land Department's 3D mapping project has been going on for many years. It's not just about low altitude economy, but it does contribute significantly to the ability to map the city and be able to plan routes. And also the academic involvement, PolyU, so it's University of Polytechnic of Hong Kong, is now actively involved in assisting the government with the regulatory changes, and got some really interesting programs, including one at the moment, which is the Last Centimeter Initiative, which is looking at how drone deliveries might be organized to actually deliver to people's balconies in high-rise apartment buildings, which we have a lot of. And also we're seeing Hong Kong police actually actively beginning to adopt the use of drones in their activities. So at Arup, as I mentioned, we work all across the region. One of the biggest things that we get asked to do is to look at this cross-border planning for the low altitude economy, finding ways to get around the issues of customs and immigration across the border, also the control of data transfer across the border, where we have very, very tight cyber security regulations in what we're able to transmit and how we're able to control, particularly BVLOS drones across the border. We're also working very closely with communities to find ways to build communities that are more accepting of advanced mobility technologies. And to that end, we've actually developed a vertiport design guide now, which is which combines many of the things that we've learned all over the world designing vertiports in different countries, and trying to contextualize that very much to the situation here in Hong Kong and in the Greater Bay Area. So these are just some of the things that we're now doing, and this is a continuous process for us all working across the region on this kind of thing. That's a quick wrap up from me. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks to the Institute for inviting me to speak.
All right. Thank you, Jeff, very much. It was definitely interesting to see Hong Kong as an example for advanced air mobility with its challenges, and definitely a huge no-fly zone. It will be very interesting to follow the developments in the country with your help. Thank you for joining us today, and we appreciate your support.